Hamas slaughtered the Israelis. Hamas took the hostages. Hamas has raped and tortured and killed hostages. Hamas refuses to make any agreement in which they have to release what remains of the hostages. I explained here several weeks ago, because then they'll think, rightly so, we don't have any leverage against the Israelis. Hamas was backed by Qatar. Hamas was backed by Iran. Iran was funded by Biden. And so we're supposed to hate on the Israelis, and most of all on Netanyahu, you see. If Netanyahu would just drop dead, everything would be fine. It'd be wonderful. Just put one of the stooges in there, one of the left-wing party leaders. That'll fix it, yeah. Israel will agree to anything. They'll have their so-called ceasefire for about 3 weeks. The Iranians will get powerful again. Hezbollah will get powerful again. And, of course, Hamas will survive. After all of this, would we support a leader who did that in America? No, we wouldn't. Why do we love Donald Trump? Because he'd never tolerate this. He's strong. Why do we love Ronald Reagan? Same thing. Same thing. So our media reports that people are starving in Gaza and they blame Israel. John Spencer, who's been really indispensable throughout all this, statistical expert on what's been going on in the casualties in Gaza, who has said from day one that the Hamas health ministry is a lie, it's a farce. He did at least work at West Point. I hope he still does. He writes, many things can be true at the same time. In an article entitled Israel's Wartime Gaza Aid is Historically Unprecedented. Unprecedented. Were we feeding the Japanese when we were fighting them? Were we feeding the Germans when we surrounded them? Were we? How about the fascist Italian regime? Did we? Did we provide aid and food and medicine to any of the enemies who attacked us and who we fought to defeat? It was victory at all costs. Flooding Gaza with humanitarian aid is the right moral thing to do, he writes. The military must balance its operational objectives with humanitarian imperatives, including the prevention of starvation, the protection of civil life. A military can restrict the flow of humanitarian supplies if the enemy is diverting them for its own purposes, of course. It's also true that civilian populations are routinely moved out of combat zones to reduce harm and ensure more effective delivery of humanitarian assistance. These are all basic truths of war, well established in military practice and international law. But there's another truth that must be acknowledged, one that is rarely said out loud despite being painful, plain and provable. There's no historical precedent for a military providing the level of direct aid to an enemy population that Israel has provided to Gaza.
Mark Levin. Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
It's official, ladies and gentlemen. My new book, On Power, is out. And those of you who are purchasing it, I want to thank you. On Amazon.com and any retail bookstore or any of the warehouse stores that currently have it, I want to thank you. Barnes & Noble has a lot of them, and Walmart, and Costco has some, and BJ's and Sam's and Target, and on and on and on. And, of course, the surest way is Amazon.com, your local bookstore. But I want to thank you all. It has received a fantastic reception. I want to thank all of the radio hosts and TV hosts who have thus far interviewed me and have read the book and have been asking really good questions, and I think we've had excellent discussions. This is what broadcasting is all about. It's not just paint by the numbers. It's not just go to websites and pick up the five top subjects. It's not just guests and guests and more guests. It's this. Talking about things that are substantive and matter. There's really few other formats in which it can be done. Truly. We can do it on Fox, and we can do it on conservative talk radio, and we can do it in some other, methods and modes and platforms, but few others. And this is the advantage of freedom of speech. This is the advantage of these industries. And so we're doing exactly what we should be doing. Talking about smart things, substantive things, I hope entertaining and interesting things. And it shouldn't be boring. It shouldn't be monotonous. I mean, these are really new ideas and new applications of old ideas as far as I'm concerned. So, On Power is the book. I hope you'll acquire yours tonight or tomorrow or soon. And we can jump in. Again, I want to thank all the hosts from today and many tomorrow and in the next several weeks. All the broadcast companies, Fox, Westwood One has been fantastic, Blaze, all the rest. I want to thank you all. We'll get into that a little bit. We have 2 big book signings coming up, too, that I want to mention. But before I do, I want to go over a few facts with you, and it'll soon become apparent why I am. Ever hear the bombing of Dresden, America? The bombing of Dresden during World War II, the Allied bombing. 2.5 days of bombing, February 13th to the 15th, 1945. The desire was just to bring an end to the Second World War, and this bombing was a terror bombing campaign against Germany that was specifically focused on civilians. Civilians. Dresden had no real military threat or application. It was a mid-sized city. And the goal of the British and the United States was to bomb it to smithereens. To smithereens. And throughout the war, Churchill had called for increased British air raids against the population centers of Germany in order to swamp German authorities and services. And as the Allied forces closed in on the Third Reich in 1945, these targets became more feasible, as Britannica points out. Before World War II, Dresden was called the Florence of Germany, considered one of the world's most beautiful cities because of its architecture and its art treasures. Having never been previously attacked in any war, the city offered increased value for terror bombing against an inexperienced population. On the night of February 13, the British Bomber Command hit Dresden with an 800-bomber air raid. 800 bombers. They dropped 2,700 tons of bombs, including large numbers of incendiaries. And they were aided by weather conditions. A firestorm developed, incinerating tens of thousands of people. The U.S. 8th Air Force followed the next day with another 400 tons of bombs, carried out yet another raid by 210 bombers. At this point, Germany was basically in the air, defenseless. The estimate is as high as 250,000 people died, as low as 35,000 in 2 days, given the influx of undocumented refugees that had fled Dresden. Almost all of the victims were women, children, and elderly, since all the men had been drafted into the war. Dresden. A historic benchmark that demonstrated the power of strategic bombing of civilian centers. Critics say the military value of the bombing did not justify Dresden's near obliteration. The city could have been spared like Rome and Paris and Kyoto. And given the massive number of civilian casualties and the relatively few strategic targets, some even called the bombing of Dresden a war crime. Though both the British and American militaries defended the bombing as necessary. Any idea why I'm mentioning this, Mr. Producer? I have to listen to the weasel, quisling Prime Minister of the UK go on and on about Israel starving Palestinians in Gaza when we all know that Hamas is behind it. I have to hear these phony influencers. You know what an influencer is? It is a self-anointed narcissist, self-righteous. They influence nobody. They babble. They talk to each other. They interview each other. I have to listen to these British podcasters and broadcasters condemn Israel? Really? And this prime minister of Britain, really? And he threatens he's going to recognize a Palestinian state like his French quisling weasel friend Macron? An individual who I don't know posted, and I retweeted it. This would be like awarding the Third Reich a new state after the Holocaust. And that's what France and the British and the Spanish and the rest of them, the Norwegians, that's what they're doing. And to hear podcasters and others in our own country to side with this insanity will never be forgotten. That will be their legacy. No matter what else they say, from today to tomorrow, no matter what else they say in the future, they will be remembered as the voices that opposed preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons. They will be remembered as the voices that turned on our ally, where the anti-Semitic capitals throughout Europe and beyond are turning on the state of Israel. They will be remembered for their hypocrisy, where they claim America first when they don't even know what it means. What they're demanding that Israel do is surrender. That's the only thing Israel can do to accommodate their demands, as they sit on their fat asses, collect their clicks and their hits and their eyeballs and their millions, going on and on about what somebody else should do. We would never do what they're demanding that Israel do. Never. And we didn't. We bombed Dresden into obliteration. And not just Dresden. We dropped 2 atomic bombs. And when you add the number of people who died in Dresden and the number of people who died from the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs, and we were involved in all 3, and rightly so. No apologies. A world war where we were attacked, where it was life and death. Makes Gaza look rather small, even though it's not, doesn't it? Dresden, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, those are only 3. Those are only 3. There were others. There's no talk in our country about feeding the citizenry of the enemy. In fact, it was a military decision that in order to stop these regimes, in order to defeat Imperial Japan, in order to defeat the Third Reich, the population was fair game. And the population, city after city, needed to be destroyed in order to put the pressure on these governments to either surrender or collapse. Almost since the beginning, Israel's been told not to do this and not to do that. Almost since the beginning. Ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. If they'd been left alone, this would have been over a long time ago, and the hostages would be out. They'd be out. But Israel's being asked to do the impossible. To feed the people of an enemy territory, while those who run the enemy territory are trying to starve their own people. And at the same time, they're being told that they need to enter into a ceasefire. But the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom says, but Hamas can't remain in charge. You tell me how all this is to be achieved. You tell me. You tell me how to accomplish that. The moron who runs Britain has destroyed his own country, as have other prime ministers before him, with open borders. Britain has a real problem now with these radical Islamists, one of whom is the mayor of London, but they're the mayor of several cities in Britain. Britain is in decline. Britain's Western standards are being usurped. Free speech is allowed as long as you attack Britain, but you better not question radical Islam. France's President Macron believes he owes his presidency to the radical Islamists. And ask yourself, what has France done? What has Britain done to try and defeat Hamas? What did they do with Iran other than appease Iran? We're perfectly willing for Iran to get nuclear weapons because they weren't willing to do anything about it. Should the United States go the way of Britain? Should the United States go the way of France? Should Israel destroy itself? A Palestinian state, exactly who would run this state? Exactly what would it look like? Exactly what would its boundaries be? Exactly how would you stop it from being another Gaza, but worse? These aren't proposals. These aren't rational policies. Israel is not going to surrender to its own destruction, no matter what the hell anybody says. But these people in our country, these influencers who influence nobody, including President Trump, nobody, they stand with the Islamists. They stand with the quisling Prime Minister of Britain. They stand with the quisling President of France. They stand with the Communist Chinese and Putin. They stand with the United Nations and UNRWA. If they know any history, and most of them are too stupid and illiterate to know anything, but if they know it, they also know they're lying. They're applying a standard to Israel that we would never, ever apply to ourselves, nor should we.
Mark Levin.